people can hear it. Skip, and let's see what we got going on. And it looks like we are live. All right, folks, welcome back to another very special episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels. Or is it? I'll let you folks out there tell us what you think the former angelic city is, because we got a lot of stuff going on right now. Anyhow, today is a very, very special day. Why? Because 73 years ago today was the Roswell crash. Now, we don't quite know, did it crash a couple days before, or we don't even know how many bodies were lying there, etc., etc. July 7th, if I'm not mistaken, to the date, is when Jesse Marcel Sr. went to the Brazil Ranch. So, let me introduce my two guests, and we will have an awesome 73rd anniversary. And for all you fine folks out there, remember, we do take questions. Obviously, please put them in chat. In questions, super chat questions go first, because without your folks supporting us, this will not be able to continue. Skip Starbucks for a day. Whatever it can do, whatever you can do, everything helps. So first, someone you've heard with me, I'm talking 7 years. We are very great friends. He is such a giant wealth of information. You probably also heard him as he's hosted his own shows, plural. And of course, he's been on multitude of other shows as a guest, people like you would recognize. For instance, Other Side of Midnight with, of course, Dr. Richard Hoagland. He was on a whole lot. The other guest is his co-host, which is the one and only Scott Teeters. So, Robert and Scott, welcome to Dr. J Radio Live.
Hi, Dr. J. Thanks for having us on.
Pleasure. Yeah, pleasure to have you both. Now, before we dive into Roswell, Robert, tell us a little bit about Scott.
Well, Scott Teeters is my co-host and has been he started out as my host. He and I have a long relationship. I think it's almost 10 years that he has on YouTube Far Out Radio Archives. And Scott did many years on the Ren's Radio Network. He did over 500 Far Out Radio programs on the Ren's Radio Network from January 2013.
Yeah, let me ask you real quick. Is that 5 days a week? The Ren's?
At first, it was 5 days a week, 1 hour each night, and then we had a lot of things going on in our life at the time, and so the amount of times I was on varied a lot. There was a stretch for several months where I was doing 2 hours every night for 5 nights a week, and then it just got bumped around 3 times a week, twice a week, and some periods where I had to be off and other periods where I was back on again. But a lot of shows.
So basically 2 to 5, literally, a week. That's a lot. I got to hand it to you.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. Now, for all you fine folks, as you've seen on my channel and other places with Robert Morningstar, we've talked about so many different issues, and I also want to publicly thank Robert, because if it wasn't for some healing techniques he's done to me and also advice he's given me, I would be 6 feet under. So, Robert, I owe my life to you. Thanks again, my dear friend.
John, it's a pleasure to have you as a friend, and I'm going to keep you here as long as possible.
Amen. Well, thank you, and God bless you. Now, let's dive into 73 years ago. Who wants to start on what happened?
Well, let me turn it over to Scott, because he's very well versed in it.
Scott,
and then I can give you some historical background from Project 1947, which I'll recommend to people.
Okay, Scott, just before you say, for all people out there, just so you know, if you recall, not even a week and a half ago, we did a show on the Cape Girardeau crash in Missouri, April 12th, 1941. And then I also had Preston Dennett on, also not too long after we did the Cape Girardeau crash, on crash and retrievals in general. And one of the big things, since we didn't want to cover Roswell that day in detail, uh, we saved it for today, is the fact that Roswell is, to this day, still the most important crash and retrieval, as well as people and information is still coming out. Scott, dear friend, take us back. July 1947, maybe even earlier. What happened leading up to the crash?
Well, I wasn't born yet, but
Me neither.
so so everything that I know is, I guess, technically hearsay. And this has been a fascinating story because it's one of those stories where, if you're looking for it to make sense, good luck. It's, I mean, I heard about this story for quite a few years, and then I remember back in 1994 there was a big splash. The United States Air Force issued a report, basically saying, no, come on, guys, it was a weather balloon, just like we said. And of course, the UFO community was just waiting with bated breath, and then they came out with this weather balloon thing. And all you have to do is think about it for not too long, and you come up with a bunch of questions like, okay, this report from the United States Air Force came out in 1994, at which point it had only been 47 years since the initial crash. And you were keeping a lid on a weather balloon? Really?
Yeah.
Now, one
Mogul,
fascinating.
right? You're talking about the Air Force's first of the two
Yeah, the
publications.
1994 report said it was a high altitude weather balloon as part of something called Project Mogul. And then they told us this really cool story that, we're talking 1947, so it's right after World War II. We had the bomb, and we were very concerned about the Soviet Union. They were our ally. Now they're our arch enemy. And this Project Mogul was supposed to be a string of high altitude balloons equipped with microphones. And the balloons were supposed to float over the USSR listening for atomic bombs popping off. Kind of makes sense, like in a low tech sort of a way. Well, let's just get some of them high altitude weather balloons, and we'll put a whole bunch of them together, and we'll put some microphones on them, and we can listen. I mean, look, anybody who's been up in a hot air balloon knows that you can be 1,000, 2,000 feet, you still hear people down on the ground talking. I mean, the sound it goes up, so you can imagine the noise level, the dB level of an atomic bomb going off. Would a bunch of high altitude weather balloons with microphones on them, would that might work? Maybe. It kind of sounds like an interesting story, but it turns out that it was just a story. And because then later, a few years later, in 1997, they came back with, I don't know, part 2 of the story, where they were addressing the issue about, well, what about the bodies that were found, the dead aliens? And then they said, oh no, those were crash test dummies. Really, crash test dummies. How come they didn't mention anything about crash test dummies in 1994? Because they hadn't thought about it. That's why. For me,
let me say one thing too. First of all, if someone was on scene at the crash, how can you say that creature, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, giant head, very skinny body, very long arms, bald, looked anything like a crash dummy, which is what, 5'6", 6 feet tall, and that giant thing? How can the Air Force be so damn blatant that they tell us that the soldiers had their memory messed up? Because wasn't it several years later about these dummies?
Something like that. But crash test dummy, the for real crash test dummies that I know from my background in the automotive world, car companies use them all the time when they crash cars to test them to see, how's this car going to do it, under various crash circumstances. But there are all kinds of different crash test dummies. There are dummies that are made at child size, adult male size, adult female size, and there's just a whole bunch of different kinds out there. And the crash test dummy thing was just absolutely ridiculous. And it was after that where I said to myself, you know what? I'm really done with this story. I don't think they're ever going to come clean about this. I'm not buying the weather balloon story. You're honestly, they were honestly expecting us to go, oh, okay, yeah, weather balloon, right. What was so special about a weather balloon with, old technology with microphones attached to it that you would want to keep secret for 47 years? It doesn't pass the sniff test at all. Yeah. And then the other thing, about the bodies and all those are crash test dummies. Yeah, sure they are. And it just seems like every couple of years or every decade or so, the government tosses out a little bit of chum, and then researchers go crazy with it for a few years, and it just kind of keeps us off their backs, because we're busy, chattering and yammering about this thing. But if you think about it objectively, this is, just my own perspective. There's no upside for the government to ever come clean about any of this stuff. They're never going to finally tell us the truth, because if they actually did, the next question is, to any thinking mind, what else are you lying about? Yeah. And they're never going to go there. They'll just never go there. And that's why, for me, I'm kind of done with it. I have an anecdotal story that's I don't know, it's kind of interesting. About 15 years ago, my wife and I got to be friends with a couple who were older than us that lived in town where we used to live in New Jersey. They're a fun couple to hang around with, Paul and Marilyn Hammer. And Paul was a really neat guy, and I say was because unfortunately he passed away a few years ago. I really miss Paul. He was just a fun guy to be around, a real happy guy, And we were having dinner with him one night, and we were still getting to know one another at this point. And Paul mentioned that on top of being a farm boy from growing up in the rural Trenton area in the 1940s, and actually living off the land with his family, and they were extremely poor. He said when he went into the Air Force, he enlisted in the Air Force, he said, I thought it was great, man, because I could have all the food I wanted. It was fantastic. He loved it. And then he mentioned that at one point he was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I said, oh, Wright-Patterson. It's where they keep all the UFOs and the dead ETs. Did anybody ever talk about that stuff? He got so different. He totally clammed up on us. He didn't want to talk about it at all. And he was, like I said, he was a very happy, jovial kind of a fella until I mentioned Wright-Patterson. And it was almost like something clicked in on him. Now, I know from listening to patriots from another era, what you might call the great generation, the greatest generation, the men that fought in World War II. They were of a different mindset in this sense. When they took an oath, they seriously took an oath. These were the kinds of men at the time where if they were told, you will never, ever, ever speak of this to anyone, or else your family could suddenly go missing. You could go missing. You will never, ever speak of this from this point forward. They took these things seriously.
Well,
unlike today.
Let's add this into the mix. The time frame, 1947, post-World War II, right? Secrets won the war, killed, and also was some of the downfall from the other side. Point being, in 1947, if you were a military man, especially at RAAF, for those of you who don't know what RAF is, it's Roswell Army Airfield. Quick history for everybody. Air Force wasn't created until after this. Point being, if someone told you to shut up for national security reasons, you didn't say a word. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And these guys took many things with them to the grave and never told anyone about it. So I think I bumped up I bumped up against a little bit of that with my friend Paul Hammer because I mean, this was this interesting evening happened pretty early on in our relationship with them, and we continued to hang out with them, and go to their house for Christmas and birthday celebrations, etc., for at least another 10 years. And Paul was always consistently a happy guy. Regardless of what was going on, he had problems just like everybody else, but he was a really happy guy. But that night when I asked him about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the UFOs and the dead ETs, boy, he became another guy.
Well, can you tell us briefly who Paul Hammer is for those who don't know?
Oh, Paul Hammer was just a fellow that we met in the little town that we used to live in. We were buying semi-antique things at farm auctions, and then we had a space in a large antique marketplace, kind of a store where you could rent spaces, and then mark up your things. And Paul and Marilyn were just another couple that were renting things there, and they were very friendly, very helpful, nice folks. And it didn't take too long, and they said, "Come on over to the house. Let's have dinner sometime." Yeah, sure. And we got to be friends of the family for quite a few years. But it was just an interesting evening because I got to see one aspect of Paul Hammer, my friend Paul Hammer, who that was very atypical of the guy that I knew.
In what way? Because
And
of how.
I could never get him to elaborate on that. And I tried to bring it up a few more times, the Wright-Patterson UFO ET thing, and I could just tell he did not want to talk about it. He would quickly change the subject, or just anything to get out of talking about it. And I figured out pretty quickly I'm probably on thin ice here, or at least I'm putting him in a position where he's uncomfortable. So just forget it, let it go. And he probably didn't know anything.
And back then, if I'm not mistaken, everyone signed they were bound to the 10-10 agreement, which was 10 years imprisonment and $10,000 fine. Now, $10,000 fine for spilling secrets of ETs or national security doesn't seem like very much, but in the 40s and 50s, and I don't know how much later after that it was used, 10 grand was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I don't know what the current agreements are for people who are involved, but I'm sure it's a lot more than 10 grand. And I don't know about the 10-year imprisonment, but obviously, if you're in military and you violate that and you had to do the 10-year imprisonment, you are not going to serve time in minimum security or anything like that prison.
Gone to Leavenworth.
Thank you for saying that. You're going to serve time in Leavenworth, which...
No, they send you to 12worth.
Where's that?
Okay.
6 feet under.
Oh!
That's the one underneath.
Okay.
Leavenworth.
I see what you're saying.
It's a pun, man.
I
couldn't resist. But I had to interject. I like what Scott told you.
We do know
I like what Scott told you. There's a very important point there. He saw the triggering of a mind control process. And he's described something that I think all of us have seen it, but we didn't realize that we saw that a methodology that's been applied to
many. Look at how strange so many of the astronauts were after they landed, after they got back from being up in space or on the moon. Their behavior was very peculiar.
I want to ask you all about that, and please bring them up. But let's back up for a quick second, and we could even come back to of course, Roswell, and I definitely want to know about astronauts. But back up to what you just said, that you have. What am I can't read my notes because of my hand. What was it that you have access to, or you do triggering, not remote viewing? What is it, Robert? Said about Paul?
See, we all know this word now. It's become very prevalent.
Okay.
Triggering.
Triggering.
Triggering somebody. We know the term, what it means, especially with regards to the losers of the 2016 election. That's where it came into popular popular vocabulary, common knowledge.
Let's fit the term.
Here's the point.
There you go. Say it.
That insanity that we call Trump derangement syndrome is the result of a mind control process that's intended to trigger rage in the person when the trigger word is pronounced. And all of these people who were at Wright-Patterson, at Kennedy Space Center, Houston, all of the bases, Wright-Patterson being the foremost, all of them, when they leave the service, they go through a ritual, okay, that's called debriefing, right? And in debriefing, they run you down your whole record, or everything you know, and then they start to impose very strict limitations, not only on what you're allowed to speak about, but on what you're allowed to remember. Because it's really a ritual. They take you in, they put you in a setting, then they administer psychotropic drugs, and they'll put you through a ritual which imposes inside the person what I call an alter individual, alternative. The alter sits in the subconscious watching the external personality. And the moment that the alter, which has been embedded, you might call it a meme now, but it's really another person. And he's the watcher. And when the watcher hears through the ears or sees through the eyes or feels through the body that the person might divulge the big secret, it jumps out like a rabbit out of a hat and it takes over. And another personality takes over. And it is sometimes composed, as a matter of fact, from cartoons. I have a dear friend, Roy Schaefer, former U.S. Marine, and he's brilliant. And he's especially knowledgeable in the JFK assassination. And he could explain to me amazing discoveries that both of us would discover the same thing and then tell each other how it came about. And he could explain everything to me perfectly. But when we got in front of an audience and it was his turn to speak, he changed altogether. He started to become hesitant. He was a kind of an aw shucks. He'd say things like, oh shucks, I hope I can remember this. And then he'd push up on his glasses. He wore spectacles. They'd slide down his nose. He'd push up on his glasses. Oh shucks, I hope I can remember this. All full of self-doubt. Where in private, freaking eat a genius, you know? So for 7 years, I observed this. And after Dallas one day, I came back to New York, and I was really puzzled by it. I said, I know that guy. I know who that guy is. Where have I seen him? That guy being the alter that was jumping into Roy's skin. Understand?
Yeah,
I've seen that
yeah.
guy before. And when I came back to New York, I met up with a girlfriend who was exceptionally beautiful. She looked like Snow White. And when I bought an album for her of the original score of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on an LP from the 1950s, she was on the cover, and I looked, and one of the dwarves was Doc. So I said, this is the guy who's he's all bashful, all shucks, and he pushes even the mannerisms of pushing the glasses up his nose. So I decided to call Roy and tell him, hey Roy, listen, I don't want you to get mad, but I think I figured out something. I think you're under mind control. I think that they did something to you when you left Marines, and blah 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 blah. What I just told you, I told him, and he said, yeah. And I said, listen, and I think I know who it is that they embedded in your subconscious. He says, yeah. And I said, listen, now you're not going to get mad at me for telling you this, are you? He said, no. And I said, well, it's Doc from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I hear this big bellowing laughter on the other side of the phone. Oh. And then he comes out and says, Robert, I'm not laughing at you. It's just too funny. But do you know what they used to call me when I worked in the editorial department of the Dayton Daily News?
What?
Where he worked at the time of the Kennedy assassination. I said, no, what? He says, everybody used to call me Doc.
Huh?
See?
Wow.
So those people, listen,
Dink.
I'm saying that while he was working there, occasionally something would happen that made Doc come out. And the people in the office recognized it then in 1963. But it took all those years to break the mind control because once I told him that, his onstage persona, his on the radio persona, as a matter of fact, Scott and I have interviewed him several times regarding the JFK assassination and the Zapruder film. So, folks, there is hope. There are ways of breaking embedded mind control, and I've just described to you one of them. It requires insight. It requires understanding
Robert, I know
Right.
you
the
know.
varieties of human
Wait,
personality. But
uh,
that's all I wanted to say because it's important
let,
for
Robert, I
people.
know that you
hold
know
on,
this,
hold on,
Robert.
real quick, Scott. I
Yeah,
want to give a shout out to Alex. Alex, please forgive me if I screw up your last name. Maybe you could phonetically write it for me after, but I'm gonna say it as Alex Owen. I hope that's right. Alex, thank you so much for your super chat. I deeply appreciate your support. It's people like Alex, folks, that keeps this going. And again, I want to thank you, Alex, and of course, anybody else's super chat. We'll keep this supporting. And if you have a question, if you super chat and have a question, your question will be asked first. Now, sorry for that diversion, but I needed to acknowledge
sure.
the supporter. Now, Scotty, what were you about to say?
Yeah, Robert, I know that you know this, but it's since we're talking about this kind of mind control, it should be mentioned that as fascinating and interesting and comprehensive as that whole field of technology, mind control technology, as fascinating and amazing as that stuff is, what is observably so is that people who have had this done to them, not everyone, but a lot of them, as the years roll by, that control starts to break down. Not for everyone, but for a lot of them. If when they get to be old enough, it's hard to tell. Do they just they don't care anymore? They're going to screw it. I don't know what they're going to do. Kill me? You
Can
know?
I tell you
Uh,
something?
yeah,
You're right on the mark, but there's another aspect to it. When they do this to a person and the person signs a contract, there is a release form, and the release form is also psychological. And I'm gonna confess something to you. I underwent that kind of mind control from the White Hats in 1968 when I was recruited into an ONI, IBM, CIA program to develop artificial intelligence. So they measured my brain waves, my brain functions, map my neural networks, and they told me they were going to take that and put it in computers and make. Okay, hold on a second. Just to finish the thought, that they were going to put it in a computer and teach a computer how to think like a human being, and they used electronic technology, a headband. Listen to this. I wore the headband that was recovered from Roswell. They
Whoa,
made,
whoa, back up
yes,
a second. You just said you wore the headband that was recovered in Roswell. For those
the
out there,
technology. I'm saying that the apparatus that was used on me,
mm-hmm.
I remember now recognize as what's been revealed as some of the technological apparatus that was recovered from the Roswell crash. And one of them was a headband with electrodes whereby the ET could steer the craft with his thoughts. And
well, it's
only now are we getting.
just like that Clint Eastwood movie.
Well,
Yes, yes.
let me add
One
this
where he
to the
steals the
mix,
plane.
guys. If you recall, obviously Bob Lazar has said multiple times that that craft is almost living like AI, and it links to the ETs or pilots' brains telepathically. Now, for those of you out there who are familiar with Colonel Philip Corso, and more importantly, if any of you had the pleasure to read his amazing book, which I'm actually reading it for the fifth time right now, The Day After Roswell, he was given a drawer, basically a three desk cabinet drawer with alien artifacts and files. One of those ET artifacts from Roswell was like a headband which the pilot wore to telepathically link to the craft and fly it. Robert, what say you about that?
I think it's all derived from the same thing that I've just described. And here's what I want to say. I don't think they realized that the apparatus itself was going to change my brain. And as a result of that, I already had an IQ of 131 when I was in high school and college. But after that, my brain took a quantum leap, couple, about 30 points. And I was tested about 7 years ago. And in the field of geometry, I have an IQ of 166. I don't want to discuss any of the others. It's not important. It's just that
Wait, you said IQ
I got the Crow
166?
brain boost. If you people watch the movie Forbidden Planet from 1957,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see where I think they got this idea. They were also trying to communicate with dolphins. This professor who was my mentor was also working with John Lilly in
Mm-hmm.
communicating with dolphins. And I think the communication with dolphins project was an adjunct to how are we going to communicate with an extraterrestrial. Now, about the release clause, this is the important part.
Okay.
Now, I've lived my whole life like this as you know, civilian intelligence analyst. I discover things and I tell the right people. I've busted a lot of cases and been involved in a lot of things. And after 9/11, which was a huge, huge shock to me.
Yeah, and by the way, we're able to see it from your window because for those people who don't know, Robert is in New York, in
Yeah,
Manhattan too, right?
right. I'm 7 miles away from ground zero.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the upshot was that that was an utter shock to my whole being. And then in January after 9/11, um, I had the occasion to realize my life, this could not have happened to me by chance.
Mm-hmm.
All of these adventures that I have described over the years, they're all true, including flying over Connecticut and almost getting hit by a meteor. I mean, that's unbelievable, but it happened to me. So I look back on my life and I said, none of this was chance. How could this happen to me? So I decided to regress myself years back to that event when I underwent that experiment in artificial intelligence. And through auto hypnosis, I put myself back there and then and remembered the contents of everything, including realizing that digital information had been downloaded into my brain and used in an equation to transfer it, thought, into numbers that were fed into a computer to make the computer think like a human being. But while I was remembering or recalling that under auto hypnosis in a state of very, very deep relaxation, let me describe to you that the headset was placed on my head with 6 electrodes, one in the front, two in the forehead, two in the back, and one directly in the back. So basically, it created a Star of David, right? And these were energized so that they could track the energy when I had a thought, and the thought was imposed by white sound and absolutely no visual information called whiteout. I had goggles that were like ping pong balls that covered my eyes, and all I saw white. It was white out. So it was a sensory deprivation experiment on one level, the eyes, but an input through the ears. So I remembered all of that, and the sound, he told me it was going to be white noise, and I expected an audio tape hiss, when you play an audio tape and just goes
Yep,
like
yep,
that.
yep.
And it wasn't that. And what came back to me was ding, ding, ding. Do you remember that sound?
Yeah.
That was the sound of the first commercial modems communicating with each other in the 1990s when they did what they called the handshake. Hey boys, the Thunder Boys are going by right now. That's the sound of New York City news. New York City is alive.
I hear a
They're alive.
double mic. Do you have two mics on, Robert? Because you're
No, I don't.
okay. Because
Yeah.
you're speaker
No,
was
that was the
picking up.
motorcycles resonating through my living room.
No,
The
no, no.
whole pack.
I heard your voice twice, so it was like an echo. I'm wondering
Oh,
if
that
you're.
sometimes happens when Scott and I are on. It may be something that happens between our two microphones, so that's why I mute.
All right.
But let me tell you the important part of this. In the regression, which I underwent and remembered all these things, I heard a voice say to me, if you live to be 53, you will remember all these things and you will understand why they were all necessary. That was my release. Somehow I entered into an agreement to participate in the development of artificial intelligence, and at the same time, without my knowledge, I was being programmed to become the equivalent of a hunter-killer submarine. Do you know what a hunter-killer submarine
Oh
is?
yeah,
Well,
HKs.
it's the equivalent of having an agent or an operative that would be set loose by himself to seek the truth and to get the truth to the right people so that it would have effect. I was the person that discovered in 1996 Muammar Gaddafi's atomic bomb development program that he was disguising as the Great South Saharan Irrigation Project. I discovered that in Landsat photographs with a friend from Australia named Gordon Much. Through him and Bill Plant of CNN, which was a good station in those days, we got that information to the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it for 5 years, and in 2002, I found out that all the Iraqi atomic scientists were missing in Iraq, but they were all in Al-Kufra, Libya. I put that two and two together, and I gave that information to National Security Services here. And you know the story. A year later, Gaddafi gave it up and became a good for a while.
Did he
But
give
there
it
was a
up?
release
Because
call.
sounds to me that we basically promised him if he gives up his nukes, that we will start trading with him
Yeah,
again and
yeah.
all sorts of stuff, and we let him get. Just basically, we took over the country, destroyed it.
Right.
That's why Kim
Yeah, we
Jong
can skip the
Un
politics.
refuses
That's a
this.
really painful thing to remember. Let's go back to Roswell.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what
Okay.
this
I just wanted to
anniversary
share
is
because
about.
hey, guess what? Scott triggered me when he told that story about Mr. Harris.
Okay,
It triggered
hey,
me to.
About who?
let me ask both of you a
What wasn't your
question.
friend's name Harris?
Oh, Paul Hammer.
Paul
Okay,
Hammer. Sorry,
now
Paul Hammer.
let me ask both of you a question. Okay, when I had Paul Blake Smith on talking about the 1941 Cape Girardeau, Missouri crash, he said that Linda Moulton Howe. Well, first of all, he said that there was two crash sites just like Roswell, and if you all recall, Stanton Friedman wrote the book Crash at Corona, which was about Roswell, and one of many books about Roswell, which also indicated the two different crash sites. Now, here's the question for you guys. According to Paul, Linda Moulton Howe told Paul Blake Smith that she believes that aboard these crafts, if they're about to crash, they have like an escape pod where the beings end up, leaving separately before the ship crashes. In both of your opinions, do you believe that it was two different craft that crashed at Roswell, and that's why there was the debris field, and then the wedge-shaped craft with the dead bodies found by geologists before military scattered them? Or do you think it was part of the same craft?
I'll let Scott go first.
Oh, thanks, Robert. it it sounds like a story to me. What can I say? I have no insider information, but it sounds
Okay.
like a story to me.
Okay, let me say this. I became friends with Stanton Friedman after I wrote him a very detailed letter explaining to him how I came to the conclusion that two UFOs had crashed over Roswell, and that one of them suffered a more severe impact than the other. It
Mm-hmm.
was a mid-air collision induced actually by the very powerful radars that were tracking them from Sandia Laboratories and the Roswell Air Force Base. So these two, I mean, super microwave beacons converged on them and screwed up their entire anti-gravity system. And the impact happened like this. The impact was from below upwards, right? One craft was higher than the other, and when the lower one crashed with the upper one, it got deflected straight down and totally shattered into shreds, which is the stuff that was found by Brazel. The other one got boosted, right, from the impact, traveled another, I think it's 25 miles to Corona, and wound up embedded in a hillside over there. So I wrote, after I wrote that to him, he wrote back to me and said, yes, I think that's, a very coherent theory. And we became friends because totally independently of Stanton Friedman, I analyzed the information. I came to the same conclusion.
Yeah, just like you said, the Brazel Ranch did have no intact parts. It was just a straight debris field, nor
Hmm.
did it have any bodies. It was only the other crash site.
Right.
There is a couple questions that I bypassed so we could get this chat. Let me get to one that is relevant to exactly what we're talking about. Let me find it here. Nicholas Cashmore, and there's more than one, just so you know. From Nicholas Cashmore. How did this apparatus from Roswell spacecraft work? I'm assuming he's talking about the headband.
How did the apparatus work?
Yes,
What
Exactly.
apparatus?
I'm
He means
assuming
the flying
that.
saucer. He means the flying saucer.
No, no,
It's
no.
called electromagnetogravitics.
I'm assuming when he means apparatus, the headband that controlled it.
Oh, the headband.
Yeah.
All right. The headband had 6 electrodes, which were fed into a computer that had the most advanced computer chip of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tracked that computer chip, and it's the computer chip that was used in the F-14 Tomahawk. And from there, the information, the 6 sources of information, were being conducted to what we recognize now as a polygraph machine or a seismograph machine.
Mm-hmm.
There was there were 6 pens scrolling on a moving sheet of paper, and so the information that was coming out of my brain was being digitized and at the same time analoged,
Mm-hmm.
like a seismic, like earthquakes that were happening in my head were being registered on this long, long sheet of paper that went on. Well, the sessions were an hour or more. I don't know how long the sessions were really because I was put into another space time. I should add this. There was a drug administered. I believe it was ketamine. When I did the experiment, I was asked, Bob, are you afraid of needles? Meaning hypodermics.
Yeah, I
I
am.
said, no, I've had everything. I've got my shots, and no, I'm afraid. I said, why? He says, well, because, now this is a very interesting part. He says, because we're going to go very deep into the unconscious, and we don't know what might come up from there.
Ketamine
So,
will get you there.
well, keep me relaxed. So, monsters from the id is, I think, what he was talking about. He said, we're going to be, I think he said subconscious, not the unconscious. We're going to be going into very deep regions of the subconscious, and we don't know what may uh, come up from there. So, we'd like to administer a muscle relaxant, if you
Muscle
will.
relaxant.
Yeah,
That's funny.
I said, well, do I have to?
Yes.
And he says, no, you don't have to. But if you
That
don't,
would
then you
apply.
can't do the experiment. so now I was being bribed, to be part of this fellowship. I was being bribed in my psychology class by the offer of, if I participated in this development of artificial intelligence, I wouldn't have to take the final. I wouldn't have to do the final year-end book report, and if I took the final test, I'd get an A. But if I didn't take the final test, I'd get a B plus. So that was pretty good.
Were they going to make
Enticing.
you? Were they going to make you a lieutenant colonel too?
I was already. By the way, this was my sheep dipping. They were snatching me out of Army ROTC. I was in Army ROTC in college, and then I decided I wanted to be an astronaut, so I switched over briefly to Air Force ROTC, and it was
Oh gosh,
precisely at this time that they jumped in and grabbed me into this, and it was great. Look, I'm alive, I'm healthy, I've had a good life, I've done good things, I've done bad things too, but I paid for them, and so I took it. I took the shot. And I said, it really relaxed me. I'm still relaxed after 50 years. So then there was that. And it was quite an adventure, and I'm very proud of it. And I'm happy that I volunteered for the U.S. Navy and that I've done good things with what happened to me and that I've recovered, because there was 30 years of nebulosity. That's what I call it. It's kind
Robert, are you sure they gave you ketamine?
Yes, I know it wasn't acid, and I know
Well,
it
what
wasn't
what did
anything.
what did it look like? I mean, it can be
No, it was an
injected, it
inject.
can be consumed in drinks, it can
No,
be
it was
snorted.
injected.
I guess it's a
you could
powder also.
snort
No,
it. Well,
no.
it's actually a liquid, and
Yeah,
the
liquid.
reason I know this is before doctors started giving it to people for micro dosing, which I have no idea why. It's a cat tranquilizer. Back when I was
Hmm.
producing events, people would generally steal them from veterinarians' office, and they came in
Hmm.
like little, bottles where you use a syringe. They would break those bottles or open them, and then pour it out on a baking sheet, and then they would bake it until it solidified, and then they would scrape it, and that's how it turned into
Okay.
powder. That's what I know from what I saw. Now, this is 20 years ago. Have things changed about how ketamine, Special K, whatever else it's called, are abused? I don't know, but that's all I know about it.
First time I ever heard of ketamine or vitamin K, it was referred to was I was reading John Lilly's book, The Scientist,
Mm-hmm.
and
See, there's the connection.
he really liked vitamin K. He liked ketamine a lot, and he would shoot up ketamine and get into his sensory deprivation tank, or sometimes he would hang out with some dolphins, and
Scott.
have
Scott.
some pretty far out experiences.
You just brought up two links to the experiment that I was involved in. Dr. John Lilly and sensory deprivation. I wasn't in a tank, but they did the goggles and the headset and the ketamine. And so you know what they were doing? They were sending me like a probe into the center of the cyclone. That's the name of Dr. Lilly's book. Yes,
Yeah,
they sent me
center
into
of the
the center
cycle.
of the cyclone. And this is what's emerged.
Uh, Let me get to some more questions. Like I said, there were a few, and a few more have added up. Now, this is Sig Sawyer. And by the way, awesome name, Sig. As you know, it's the name of firearm
Yeah,
company.
I like
Yeah,
it.
really.
Yeah, right. Was the Roswell crash from hitting another craft or something else? And of course, I want both your opinions.
Go ahead,
I didn't
Robert.
hear the question well. I'm sorry.
Was the Roswell crash from hitting another craft or from something else?
Oh, I described the collision.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. The only wrinkle I had to add in that is again what I just heard not too long ago when we did a show on the 1941 crash in Missouri. However, I still feel that Roswell itself was two craft hitting each other. I believe.
I'd love to talk about Cape Girardeau. That's a beautiful story.
Well, what is that story? Well,
That story is that By
Well,
the way,
do you want to see if there's any other questions about Roswell that we
oh,
passed real
okay,
quick?
yeah, yeah, we can talk about Cape Girardeau later, but
Okay, yeah, okay.
it's a
Uh,
very, very nice story.
okay.
And there's proof. There's proof. There's photographic proof of it.
This is from Jay Crapper. Do we know the GPS coordinates of the Mac Brazel Ranch? Ooh, good question. I'd love to know that.
Yes, we do because that was on a deed, but we also know the crash site of the one into the hillside in Corona. That's the more difficult one to find because it's totally open desert and no roads, so it's overland trek to get there. The significant thing is that it's at about 33 degrees of latitude, and it's connected through a horizontal line, to a lot of other interesting places. Uh, you do well to research that. I was able to track it when I did get the both coordinates. I was able to track it through Google Earth
Uh,
and actually find the hillside. But I'll be damned if I'm going to try to find that on the ground. Like, there's nothing there, absolutely nothing there.
okay, let me see what else. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody's question that they've written. Um, okay, thank you, Pam, for writing that notice about people to write your questions in caps. Let me make sure there wasn't another one that we missed. We talked about the apparatus. We talked about the coordinates. We talked about, and I believe we are caught up on the questions. Okay, gentlemen. Now, what was the next thing you wanted to? What were you just about to bring up, Robert? Before we went to these questions, the Cape Girardeau. I believe you started talking about.
Oh yeah, I really wanted to take an opportunity here to just give my salute to
Mm-hmm.
Rush Limbaugh, who is a radio great, and he
Yes.
is not well, but he's
Yeah, I
still
know. He's got
broadcasting.
cancer.
And
Yeah.
he was born in Cape Girardeau, and he knows this story, having grown up around it. The story is that I believe April
April
19,
12th, 1941. Yes.
exactly, in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, a UFO crashed on a hillside, and the townspeople rushed to the crash site, and they rescued the pilot. And all of them, good Christians, were really concerned that this pilot, whoever he was, he looked like he might have been from another country, you know. But they thought first that, oh my God, this pilot might die. Let's get the minister and administer
Yeah,
him
the
the last rites.
pastor. Yeah, that's
So
right.
they got Pastor Hoffman to
Yep.
race out to the crash site where this little body in a unitard, I guess, or it looked practically naked. I've seen two photographs of this, and this is why I believe that this is absolutely true. These two photographs are exquisitely coherent. And so what happened is they went and they gave him the last rites. And while that happened, two men in fedora hats and white shirts picked up the body and held it gently, actually like a baby.
And they took a
Two,
photograph with it? Is that what we were talking about?
yes, listen
Yeah.
to this. This is why I believe this is absolutely uh, proof positive.
Mm-hmm.
There are two pictures of the same scene. Okay, there were two photographers. It was night, but only one photographer had the flash. So figure it out. This is the beautiful part of this. So one shot is of the two men in the fedora hats. They look like Masons to me, by the way.
It's
Okay?
ironic you said that because when we did 2 hours on this crash alone, well, we know the president at the time was a Mason. The president before him was a
Yeah, right,
Mason.
right.
And
Yeah.
there was a Masonic lodge right there in Cape Girardeau.
Yep. And if I recall correctly, the vice president was secretly a member of a Tibetan Buddhist sect. That's another story. John Nance Gardner. That's why he didn't become vice president the next time around. But anyway, here's the beauty of this story. Oh, about 15 years ago, I came across the two photographs. One photograph is a full frame of the two men holding the alien. And the alien has a beautiful countenance. It's actually like a smiley face, or the cuteness of E.T. The E.T. in the E.T. movie by Spielberg could have been modeled on the expression on this picture. And the second picture is of the same scene, except the silhouette of the photographer with the flash
Hmm.
is in the picture, obstructing the lower part of the picture. So this genius old little farmer photographer with a box camera that had only two settings, click and fully open, opened up his camera in the dark, let the reporter or whoever he was with the flash camera shoot the picture, used his flash to record his picture. That's why I believe that Cape Girardeau is indisputable. I don't think there's anybody on the planet who could think up to hoax a picture like the one I've just described to you. You
Now,
got it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, let me ask you. Let's see here what I wanted to write here down. Okay, I the reason why Roswell, even though it's 73 years old, and there have been a lot of crash and retrievals, not just in the United States, but all around the world. During that time, RAAF Roswell Army Airfield was the only nuclear air wing in the world. That's where we had our nukes. That's where the Enola Gate initially took off from, and I could see why ETs were paying attention to it. Now, after the Roswell crash, we're talking like right after. We're not talking, when Philip Corso got involved. Where did uh, where did things started go? I'm talking about the crash, the saucer, the debris, the artifacts, and the ETs. And then after you talk about that, I would really love to talk about Walter Haut.
Hey guys, before we drift off into another subject, I was just as you all were talking, Robert, you were telling a story about the Cape Giraldo ET
Yeah.
photograph. For our listeners, if you go to Google and you do an image search for Cape Giraldo, that's Girardeau, Cape Giraldo ET photograph, the picture that Robert was just describing is right on there. Somebody put it up on
Oh, that's
Pinterest.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm so
It,
happy
it's
that you
it's
get to
the
see.
one with two people, essentially on one on either side of the ET, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Well,
Yes.
there
Yeah.
are two images show up. One is of these two fellows with the fedoras and fedora hat, and they have this what looks like a little child with a no hair and a big head and big eyes. But then there's a silhouette of a person in front of the image, and then there's another image that shows up where everybody is in silhouette.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to look that, and anybody out there check that out. If I had known that prior to, I would have had that here for
Yeah,
people
just
to
look
see
up
in the
Cape
stream.
Girardeau. Girardeau, it's an unusual spelling. It's
Yeah,
Girardeau ET photograph. And Google's got a lot of problems there, but one of the great things about the Google search engine is you can mangle a word and it'll still get
still
you where
fix
you
it.
want to go.
Yeah, yeah. Considering
Hey,
I've searched a lot because, like I said, not even 2 weeks. Well, I think it was just 2 weeks ago. This past Saturday, I did a full 2-hour stream on the number one authority on Cape Girardeau, the only person who has written an entire book just on that incident.
yeah. By the way, Dr. J, we have half an hour left.
Yeah. Now,
And you know what? I mean, these things just happen by chance. So I just talked to Dr. J yesterday, and off the top of our heads, saying, let's get together, do a radio show. And we just decided the subject tonight. But I'm taking, so, not but so, I'm taking the opportunity to share a very special treat with the audience. I'm holding in my hands a top secret document from 1947, which is
dear
the
Roswell.
official Roswell report that was made to the National Security Agency.
Whew.
It is called Assessment of the Situation, Statement of position on unidentified flying objects. And it's directed to Defense Intelligence Agency, Office of Counterintelligence, Washington, D.C.
After we're done,
Operation Majestic. Okay, I'm just telling you the title, so if you listen to the program and try to Google it, you can search for it and find it. And I'll
well,
tell
I'm
you where to
hoping
find it.
afterwards you can give me a link to that because I am really, really interested in that. Now,
Okay?
let me go back to the two questions. That way we could cover those, and then, of course, I'll let you guys go whichever
Okay.
direction you want. I, the reason why I talked about where did things go is because we know that General Ramey came in and was involved. Was it Fort Hood, Texas, or was it another base in Texas?
Yeah, they took the stuff to Fort Hood.
Okay, and we
They
also
flew
know
to
Fort
Fort Hood,
Riley, Kansas, and we also
and that was
know
a truck. That was the truck convoy that went up there that Corso saw. By the way,
yes,
Philip Corso describes the headband that I described to you
that
that was used
exactly. That's why
in
one of the
68.
reasons I talked,
So that
I
was 20
mentioned that.
years later,
Yep,
1968,
and
69.
the other place I wanted to mention is Wright Pat, the Blue Room at Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The Blue Room, well, I don't think it's a room, just as Preston Dennett said. It can't be a room if it houses, ETs, artifacts, and maybe full blown ships. Maybe it's a hangar, maybe it's underground, but I'm sure you heard the story of Nixon bringing Jackie, is it
Oh, that
Lee?
happened in Florida.
Yeah, okay, that was Homestead. You're absolutely right. The point
Yeah,
is,
Homestead Air Force Base.
Wright
yeah. I
Pat's Blue Room is supposedly alleged that the most secure area in Wright Pat that does house ET gear and ETs themselves.
Hey, let's ask ourselves a question.
Sure.
How come? How come? How come there are bodies at Wright Patterson? How come there are bodies at Homestead? How come there were bodies at other Air Force bases? How come there was a body at Fort Dix, New Jersey, where the MPs killed an alien that had dropped out? A flying saucer was seen, and then an alien was seen running, and he ran to a fence at Fort Dix, McGuire Air Force Base, and he was shot, and his body lay not on the runway, but close to a runway and a
What
road.
year is this?
This happened in the 1990s, early
Jeez.
1990s. Now, the point is, there are a lot of alien bodies around because there are a lot of crashes around.
Mm-hmm.
In March of 1948, there was a crash at Aztec, New Mexico.
Yes.
There was a crash at Kingman, Arizona. So there were a lot of crash recoveries. And what I want to tell you, how would you like to hear the ET's side of the story
Oh,
as to why they
please,
were at
please
Roswell?
do tell us.
I cherish the document, but I also cherish the person who got it to me. That is Dr. Robert Wood,
Mm-hmm. Bob Wood.
Majestic
Yep.
Bob
Great guy.
Wood,
Great guy.
majesticdocuments.com.
Oh, you're
That is a
talking
treasure.
about the briefing documents, the 1952 MJ-12 documents, where it
They're
includes
in there, but no,
names.
this is prior to that. This is the
Okay.
very first one before it was all homogenized and sanitized and edited. Because when Vandenberg, General Hoyt Vandenberg, there's a
Mm-hmm.
name for you, Hoyt,
Yeah.
General Hoyt Vandenberg, when he was presented with Project Sign's report that the alien crash was not extraterrestrial and it was celestial. That's what they called it in those days. They called them Celestians. They didn't call them extraterrestrials. Since they came from the heavens, they called them Celestians. Or maybe because they're sort of bluish, some of them. But here, I'm going to tell you this. This document contains the information debriefed from the alien that survived the crash. And it's going to blow your mind when you hear what the aliens said was the reason they came here.
Oh, jeez. I can't wait. What?
Hey, the reason they came here, and it took them 20 years to get here, was that circa 1923, their planet started to suffer gravitational quakes that were being caused by energy beams that were being directed from planet Earth. They picked up the signals and communicated back on the same frequencies to tell the person to stop sending those signals. You're messing up our gravitational field and destabilizing our planet. But the alien said he didn't turn it off. So we had to come here. And the alien says, that scientist was someone you call Nikola Tesla.
Huh.
And this document goes on to discuss how Tesla created disequilibrium in between solar systems, and they describe him as an outlaw scientist. Get that? So, other very interesting things that the aliens said. They debrief him and they ask him, how long have you been coming here? And he said, thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, as a matter of fact, we left evidences of our visitations here in many places. And he says, now, if you were to go to this country that you call Yugoslavia and dig, you will find that 4,000 years ago, we left artifacts there, and we more or less seeded or planted a new kind of, like hybrid something. So Yugoslavia seems to be the center of, let's call it an AI experiment they did with human beings, where they boosted the human beings in the Yugoslavia area 4,000 years ago, according to this document. So it was because Tesla didn't understand the signal they sent back, and so didn't stop his experiments. Remember, what were his experiments? Microwave experiments to give free energy, to beam it out universally so everybody could tap it. Well, apparently it was amplified to such a degree that it was upsetting if they are Zetas, it was upsetting the Roswell aliens.
Is this coming from Zeta Talk?
No, this is coming from the NSA document that I just cited to you. Okay. No, I don't ascribe to Zeta Talk.
No, either do I.
I don't trust Zetas.
I've listened to her enough times. I go, I don't think so, sweetie.
No, I don't trust Zetas. I don't trust aliens, and neither should anyone else. They have their agenda, and it's not in our self-interest.
Let me direct both of you to a super important topic that we cannot miss if we're going to talk about Roswell. Colonel Walter Haut, okay?
Mm-hmm.
As you both know, after he died, 5 years after his death, his lawyer had a notarized letter written by Walter Haut who specified that only after his death, after 5 years that elapsed, is that letter to come out. Now, tell people, because you guys are my guests, who he was, what he said prior to his passing about Roswell, and more importantly, what did that letter that was created before he died but released 5 years after his death say?
I'm not at all familiar with it, so go ahead, Robert.
Okay. Well, Walter Haut, Colonel Walter Haut, was actually Lieutenant Walter Haut at Roswell Air Force Base. And he got the first reports about the recovery of a flying saucer by the USAAF. Mm-hmm. And so he was a press officer, you know, and in those days, the press officer at military bases wanted to get PR, good PR for the service, right? So what was the hottest topic in the country? Flying saucers. And all of a sudden, the U.S. Army recovers a crashed flying saucer. Oh my God, this is the greatest news story that ever hit the earth. So Lieutenant Walter Haut goes into Colonel Blanchard's office. He says, we recovered this flying saucer. It wouldn't be great if we get a headline, you know? And Blanchard says, yeah, okay, let it go. So Haut goes out and he puts a press release that flying disc recovered by USAAF. You know the headline. If you Google that same series of pictures. Roswell crash, you'll find a newspaper from the Roswell paper that says exactly that. So that goes out over the news wires, and wow, what a triumph, what an accolade. The U.S. Army's captured a flying saucer, but when they realize they've got bodies, aliens, weird top secret technology, a nuclear engine. Oh, yes. This thing was driven by a very small compact nuclear engine, which was capable of generating the force fields, torsion force fields, EMG, electromagnetic gravitics, and able to drive it and direct it. So they freak out. The military freaks out. We can't let the Russians know we have this. So they come down on then Captain Jesse Marcel, who brought all of the gear in and, realized that it was a flying saucer, not a balloon. So they have to pull him in to the cover-up. So they drag him over to this press conference they had with General Ramey, and they mixed up torn up weather balloon parts, tin foil, aluminum crap, with a couple of little things that were on the floor that were really from the crash. And Ramey comes out and reads up a statement that says, well, this is a weather balloon, right? So that makes poor Captain Jesse Marcel look like a dunce. But they drag him in, give him the orders that you got to sit here and you got to pose with these pictures and say that they were a weather balloon pictures. So Marcel cooperates. And here's another beautiful picture you got to find. There are pictures of Captain Jesse Marcel squatting down, holding a piece of aluminum foil in his hand.
Yep.
But you got to look at the picture. You got to look at his hand. He's bugging out his eyes. It's not natural. The expression is not. He's actually physically, intentionally bugging out his eyes wide open, and he's holding the material with his hands. One of his hands is palm down, clawing one edge of the material, and he's giving the finger. He's giving the finger downward. It's a fantastic picture.
That photo is readily available if you look
readily
at photos.
available.
Yeah.
But who can read body language like I do? I swear to God, I love that picture.
You're
That's
looking
like
at
the
my
Vietnam
Robert.
guys
You're
that
looking
used
at
to
my
blink.
notes.
Yeah.
Robert, you're looking at my notes. You must be remote viewing because I had on my notes here about the Jesse Marcel photo.
Scott, we are in the Vulcan mind meld.
Yes, indeed. The Vulcan mind meld.
Really? You were noting that?
That is such an odd photograph because Jesse is looking. He's sitting on the floor. He's holding this material. And
Oh,
he's
dude,
looking up.
he's a joke at that point, and it makes me really sad.
Listen to what the pose says. Listen, he's not kneeling, he is squatting, and he's saying, I'm taking a crap on all of this and giving it the finger downward and pointing it. It's just so beautiful, man. This is like the Vietnam vets or Korean vets and Vietnam who were forced to read these things, and they start blinking their eyes and blinking Morse code, saying, I'm being forced to say this.
Here.
It's beautiful. I love that.
Gents.
The truth always comes out, man. The human body, human being, the mind, the soul has to express truth or get it to somebody under duress. We find a way of getting it out. And there, God bless Captain Jesse Marcel for that moment. He took a crap on the fake evidence and he gave everybody the finger. I salute
well,
you.
I'm looking at the picture and I don't see him giving the finger.
Hold on, gents. First, let me give a shout out to another great person here, Rockstar. Thank you so much for your support and your super chat, and I really appreciate for the support. And anybody else out there who supports, I always appreciate you. So thank you again. Now, let me add another little wrinkle to you guys, to your little mix here. Now, as he's, I don't think it's the picture. Maybe it is the picture that he's squatting down from a different angle. Our technology has done us justice. I don't know who's holding the letter, but there's a letter, and that's right. Now,
Yep.
because our technology has gotten better, rather than when they enlarged it, it's pixelated, it's unreadable.
Hmm.
They have been able to enlarge it digitally, and
Yep.
now that letter is literally legible. Now,
Yes.
because it's folded at some points, we don't get the whole angle, we don't see all of it. But based on what they were able to identify, we got almost all the letter. And one of the main things, it talks about a crash, it mentions victims. So I don't know what
Yes.
skeptics have to say about that,
Oh,
because you can't deny what's in that letter. It's not open for interpretation anymore. If
yeah.
people go out and search the zooming in, and how over the recent years we are able to finally read that letter.
Hey, let's give credit where credit is due. The person who did that is David Rudiak. Look him up.
Oh,
R
I
D
know I
I
know
A
of
K.
him. I know of him.
Yeah, he did that work. And there's another very important word in there. They refer to the extraterrestrials by a very strange word, Darwas.
Interesting.
Darwas.
Because I do know 7 years later in the Eisenhower meeting, they referred to them as the Ethereums or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes they call them Etherians, other times they call them Celestians. Another thing is Oppenheimer and Einstein were advised of this.
Mhm.
And that's where they came up with the concept that these guys they were trying to integrate it into what we know. And he kind of tried to make it that these guys might be angels. And that's why they initiated Project Jehovah, Majestic Jehovah.
Mhm.
So if you look
Interesting.
around, you can find a letter that is between letters that are between Einstein and Oppenheimer discussing this subject. And here, let's not forget this.
Mhm.
The IPU, the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, was the recovery unit that was sent from Roswell to get all the bodies and the pictures. They made a report to General Twining. And in that report, they cited the recovery of the bodies,
Mhm.
the death of MPs by suicide, the death of doctors by contamination with some unknown virus,
Okay.
the, the discovery of human body parts in
Ooh.
sections, containers in the craft.
Okay, let me ask you about that, because I this is not the first time I heard that. We all hear about cattle mutilations. Linda Moulton Howe was the person who blew the whistle about this in her book. I don't recall, something Harvest, and if it wasn't
Strange
79,
harvest.
thank you. In the early 80s, right? She really, put it on the map. Now, we also know that there are human mutilations. I'm sure both of you have seen photographs of them, which look very similar to cattle mutilations. For instance, one side of the face is intact, the other side, it looks like, I mean, so precise. I don't think our
Yeah.
technology in the
Yeah,
80s
those
and 90s,
mutilations are always
Well,
right?
incredibly
Dr. J,
precise.
I've
Yeah.
seen film.
So we have
I've seen the film of Roswell bodies being offloaded on an army off an army truck and into another one.
I would love to see that. If people have seen what I've showed, the Skinny Bob and Family Vacation video, which I've confirmed that that is real extraterrestrials.
Let me tell you something else.
Yes.
The aliens had victims, male and female victims.
Humans?
The human victims, yes.
Okay, now
And
again, going
in
back to
films I've
the
seen, they brand the
mutilations,
people.
right? Going back to the mutilations, I've
Yeah,
heard that there was more than one crash, including Aztec, that had animal and human body parts. Now, my question to both of you is, do you think that's the direct correlation from the mutilations?
Scott, you want to
It
talk?
certainly fits. I mean, there are so many missing people, just Americans, let alone world citizens. There are so many missing Americans. It's staggering. The name of the fellow. Polides?
Polides.
Polides, yeah.
David Polides.
Oh,
Yeah, David
David
Polides.
Paulides missing 411. Yes, I know him
Yeah,
well.
it's totally bizarre that every time this guy tried to to dig into park rangers, officials that run the parks. Every time he tried to dig into getting information on all these missing people, he consistently ran up against a brick wall. I mean, these people consistently do not want to talk about all these missing people that just poof, they just go away. They're in the state federal parks, and it's it's another one of those wild mystery kind of things, where they picked up and then I don't know, experimented on. Who the hell knows? Not a great place to be going, Really, I know it's beautiful and all that stuff. Thank you, Teddy Roosevelt, for all the national parks, but some people go in and they never come back.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Okay.
It happens too often.
Are you guys ready for another question from the chat?
Fire away.
Okay. This is from Alex. Again, I hope I say this properly. Owen. Dr. J, how many of the interdimensional that inhabit our woods are extraterrestrial? Who wants to take that first?
Could be all the above. Who knows, really?
Yeah. Well,
many years ago, I remember listening to Jim Sparks, who's a UFO abductee.
Ah, yes.
And he said, basically, one of the things that he said, or what I took away from the many hours that I listened to him being interviewed, and every time I ever heard Jim Sparks, he just always seemed to me to have that ring of truth about what he was saying. I mean, he said a lot of very far out stuff. But what I took away from anytime I think of Jim Sparks, what I think of is this: that one of the things that he basically said was that these extraterrestrials, well, that's what we call them, beings from someplace else. They obviously have their own name, if they even have names. They have been doing this for so long. They don't care about us. They don't care anything at all about us. They have heard literally every question you can possibly imagine. Do you believe in God? Is Jesus? Do you know Jesus? What's your propulsion system? Where are you located in the country? And they could care less. They clearly have an agenda that we haven't quite figured out yet, but they've been here for a long, 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 long time. Some people, like Jay Widener, have suggested that these could be the most recent manifestations of the archons. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
Who absolutely knows? I mean, when I first got turned on to John Lamb Lash through Jay Widener talking about this topic of archons, it made more sense to me than anything I had ever heard concerning this open question about extraterrestrials and who are they and what is their purpose here. And I came to the conclusion that they are not. Most of them are not our space brothers. They're not angels. They're not here to help us. What are they here to do? I have no idea, but it's nothing to our benefit. They seem to have their own agenda, and at this point, we don't quite understand what it is, and maybe you don't really want to know what it is.
Yeah, actually,
like
Jay Widener also told me that the Arcturians are on the moon. So, great guy, and obviously
they're everywhere. Apparently,
there's much more to find out there. Now, okay, because we're
Before
running
we
near
move
the
on,
time.
since we mentioned archons, if you want to get a sense of what archons might kind of sort of be like, you got to watch this wonderful movie called Strange Thomas.
Okay, I will definitely write that down.
The slithery, shadowy creatures are very much like what John Lamb Lash describes as archons. And they love to hang out in bars, by the way, because there are a lot of really screwed up people and angry people in bars.
Now, let me ask you this. Okay, because we kind of passed about this, and I want to make sure this is in before we end this. 5 years after Colonel Walter Haut died, the memo that he had his lawyer release. Talk about it, gentlemen.
Well,
Robert, you'll have to go for it because I'm not.
I mean, to
yeah,
me,
he
that's
verified,
one of the.
He verified everything we've heard from Glenn Dennis, the mortician, who's related the story of the nurse. I would like to recommend to everyone a wonderful book the story of Matilda McElroy was a secretary at Roswell Air Force Base, and when they brought in the alien, they found out that Matilda McElroy could hear its thoughts and communicate with it telepathically. Now, this is separate from this document that I've just read to you from the estimate of the situation. This
Mm-hmm.
is a book by Lauren Spencer, who knew her, and she, before her death, she revealed that she had had many hours of debriefing the alien, and they wrote the most amazing book. I have rarely read a UFO book that changed me, my feelings and my nature, my philosophy, as much as this book
What's
has.
the name of the book?
It's called Alien Interview
Okay.
Yeah, oh, well,
by Lauren
I've seen the
Spencer.
video of it. I've definitely seen the video of it. Now, 5 years after he died, he contradicted a lot of what he said before because he was kind of towing the line of what Raimi
Cena.
said and other people said. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm glad that that came out. Now, I remember during when Preston Dennett was on here, we did a history on crash and retrievals, which we could not cover all of them in the United States because there's so many, but we did cover a good amount. Let me make this clear for everybody out there because I know Don Schmidt, Tom Carey, and a few people say this. When someone makes a deathbed confession, well, first of all, I'm going to take two sides to this. The morality of it. Who wants to die and before they die lie? However, I've heard Don Schmidt and Tom Carey say this and others say this all the time. I could tell you, as a non practicing attorney myself, when someone is about to die and they make a confession, that does not is it's not courts do not recognize it. You cannot die and on your way dying say, by the way, the moon is made of cheese. No. The only way it's admissible in court is if it involves if what you say involves the manner of your death. For instance, if you get shot and you're dying and a bystander comes up to you and you say the guy in the blue Honda shot me, that's admissible into court. So when everybody out there says, "Oh, well this was said before he died, etc." No, folks, they're not admissible into court. But morality wise, nobody wants to die and leave a lie, and that's why
Yeah.
I definitely give credence to those. Now, I have kept you
Okay.
guys a little over. Clearly, we went on multiple different paths,
Oh, it
which
always
is
does
great.
that, Dr.
But
J.
I did want to ask you if there's anything else you guys want to cover before we end the stream.
Well, briefly, since you mentioned Matilda O'Donnell
McElroy.
McElroy,
Mhm.
the book Alien Interview is available on YouTube. Or, I'm sorry, not YouTube, Amazon. You can get a Kindle version or a paperback version. Paperback's $20, Kindle is $8.50. So if we've picked your interest,
Oh, you have, yes.
Alien
Actually,
Interview on
yeah,
Amazon. Go for it.
yeah. Actually, Scott, you spoke correctly with the first time. Lawrence Spencer did do a reading of Alien Interview that is on YouTube, so you can search it.
Okay.
And he reads her testimony. Although it comes from a woman, it's a male's voice, but it's an amazing story, and it's coherent with this document I read to you. This program on Roswell would not be complete without me going back to, I think, point 10 of the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit report, which is an Army report that says CIG has discovered that Congressman John F. Kennedy, Democrat of Massachusetts, son of Joseph P. Kennedy, member of the president's program to reorganize government, was apprised of these events on a flight from Boston to Washington by a staff member of the Secretary of the Air Force. That was today, July 7th.
Well,
This is
I
when they were
definitely
digging
think.
up and making up the report. So they were watching John F. Kennedy because John F. Kennedy was intimately interested in UFOs. And I believe that it was because he experienced UFOs in the South Pacific when he was on Guadalcanal. He had experiences or learned from the natives of the dragonfish, and that's for
Interesting.
another show. But John F.
Well,
Kennedy was put on a watch list as a result of the IPU report.
Robert, you
Let me
probably
also
have a
say
handle on
this.
this.
Ever since Jim Mars died, the two people that I always said were the top JFK experts were Robert Morningstar and Jim Mars. Jim Mars sadly passed away. Folks, if you want to know the most detailed uh, information involving JFK's life and his death and who was involved, etc., Robert Morningstar is the go-to guy. As a matter of fact, if you noticed, usually around the time that the anniversary of the very, very sad assassination, Robert Morningstar is my guy that I've generally brought on for the last 7 years to talk about JFK. So I want everyone to know that. Now, Robert is so versed in so many different topics, which is why I always love speaking to him. Because we could do a show like we did today on Roswell. We could do on different species, crash and retrievals, you name it. And also, I want to thank you, Robert, also for all the healing you have given me. Now, anything else you gentlemen want to cover?
Yeah,
Yes,
Robert,
Scott had something to say.
since we're giving accolades to researchers concerning the JFK assassination, you've got to include right next to Jim Morris, and I love Jim Morris. I've unfortunately I only was able to have him on Far Out Radio one time, and it was really a thrill for me because I had spent hundreds of hours listening to him on Coast to Coast AM and as well as the Jeff Rense program. But the other researcher that must be included in this conversation is John Barber. And
Oh,
the
of
work
course.
that he has done is just he has another aspect of all this that comes through the many hours that he spent interviewing Jim Garrison that you have to include if you're a serious researcher of the JFK assassination. John Barber, great guy.
And his films, the Garrison
Yes,
tapes,
yeah,
and the
Garrison tapes
second
are awesome.
assassination of President Kennedy.
And his book is a great read. Your Mother's Not a Virgin. I kid you not. It's about 750 pages, and I couldn't put it down. It was terrific.
Well,
That's
I'm
funny.
gonna have to add that to my book. Fortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, I love reading, and I have a ton of books. Publishers have been sending them for years to get guests on, and
Yep.
on top of that, I keep buying books. So currently, this is a bad way. I hope no one takes this advice of what I do. I'm currently in the middle of now 7 books. It was 6. What I do is I'll read a chapter in one, then go on to the next, and go on to the next.
Yeah.
One book that I'm not very happy about that I am reading is The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton. But hey, we'll talk about that another time.
Well, that's John
Oh,
Bolton.
you mean Yosemite Sam?
I got that. No, yeah,
John
Yosemite
exactly.
Sam.
Bolton.
That's a
I
good one.
got that book. Now, real quick, let me. I want everybody out in the chat and anybody who's listening to this now and in the future. Because we just celebrated the 4th of July, obviously, I cover lots of different topics. I want to get your opinion, folks. And mind you, if you leave me a comment after the shows are live, since I do have the YouTube Studio apps on my phones and the notifications are on, it is me, myself, no one else that responds to them. So I would like to ask all of you over the next days and weeks before it's too late and the month is over, for this month, on top of putting people that have been waiting to be put on, I could bring on the federal agencies, the people that I've had. The NSA whistleblower, Bill Binney. I have 2 DE agents, one who is overdue, sent me a book, Mike Vigil. Then there's the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, FBI, United States Secret Service, CBP, as well as a General Vallely. And maybe General Flynn will be able to do this round since last time Joseph Flynn was on. Maybe General Flynn needs a little bit more time to get over all this drama he's been dealing with. But I'd like to get your opinion, folks, if that's what you would like to hear, considering we just celebrated the nation's birthday. Now, that's what I wanted to say. Now, if you guys all see on the screen right now, Pam Brettenberg, my social media manager, who does more than that, she created that image. The only one thing that needs to be changed is because I was shadow banned on Twitter for saying something conservative. And so I had to create a new Twitter account, which is instead of Dr. J Radio Live, it's Dr. J Radio Live New, NEW. I lost my 39,000 plus followers, and so it's literally from the bottom up. And also remember, please thumbs it up. Now, in the past, I would say you could also tag me in Twitter and I would respond. And yeah, you could do so, but I'm not in Twitter as much unless my followers go back up, which kind of broke my heart because it took 6 years to get that. Now, that's what I wanted to say before the show is over. I'm going to let you folks say whatever else you want to say. I definitely want you guys to plug in your shows and where people can find you. I'm going to leave the last word with you folks. And as after that, I'm going to give one more shout out and then we'll close out.
Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, Robert, it was about at least 5 years ago that you first participated in the Secret Space Program conference. It was held out in California. And I thought that was so awesome because I believe that one of the foundational aspects of that group that came together was this, that they basically were saying, we're not waiting for the government to tell us anything anymore. They're not going to tell us anything that we already know. And we're just going to move on from there. And I had several of the you and several of the other people that were presenters of the Secret Space Program that was put on back 5 or 6 years ago. And I thought it was awesome that finally, we're not waiting for the government to tell us anything. We're going to come to and form our own conclusions. But what has happened to that effort? It just seems to have gone nowhere. As a participant in the first one, are they doing anything?
Oh, I disagree. I think it was incredibly successful.
Well, it was, but what's happened?
No, we succeeded in getting the United States Navy, the Department of Defense, to admit and show us photographs, videos of real UFOs. And they admit that it's an otherworldly technology, not of this earth. Don't know who's running them, but they're not hostile, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we achieved disclosure. The particulars are still coming in. But the only thing that I want to say is on a personal note, and it involves all of us. So I want to give a hearty congratulations to our fellow co-host, Johnny Webb in London.
Yeah, he's in the chat.
His wife, and his newborn son, Toby.
Yes.
God bless you all.
Yeah, Johnny's been in the chat too, just so you know.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I told him we're on. So congratulations to Johnny, Toby, and the missus.
There's something that I don't want to say because it is private, but I do want to give a shout out again to both of the super chatters, Alex Owen, I hope I said that properly, and of course Rockstar. Thank you both because this show depends on support from you folks in order to make it happen. If anyone else is interested in helping, all we need is for you to spread the message. Drop the links to these shows as many places as you can. And, of course, I will work on Patreon. And very, very soon, I have a brand new awesome site that's going to go live. So the site that you've been seeing for 6 years or so is completely revamped. And shortly, you'll see it live. And I will be offering archives to see if folks are interested in that. If they're not, well, hey, it's been a 2.5 year in the making experience, and if that doesn't work, I'll still be streaming on this, and I will be trying to do the quadruple stream, meaning that through the same software, I could stream to YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope, I think it's called, which is Twitter's new streaming service. The point is, I'm going to try to do all four So watch for that in the future. And ultimately, I'd like to bring all those folks here onto YouTube. With that being said, folks, I want to thank my guests again, and who are also hosts and friends, Robert and Scotty. Thank you, or Scott. Thank you so
Thank,
much.
thank
And
you.
with that being said, you guys hang on for a quick moment. Everybody else, thank you for joining us today. And I will continue. I will stream those other two documentaries that I promised you. Just let me know when you guys want to see them. If you want to see them tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And Thursday, we will do another live show. And with that being said, folks, this is Dr. J in the city of blank. Blank for you to fill it in, and we'll catch you on the flip side.